Well, it's all change at Cheltenham Town on the horizon, isn't it? The looks like new owners are going to be coming in, but it looks like it's going to be after this summer transfer window, depending on the pace of the takeover and who those owners are. So that looks like that's going to be the central theme among Cheltenham Town fans, and what sort of change that's going to represent for the football club as it looks to build a new era. Because I think in the last 30 years, Cheltenham Town have had two or three extremely successful eras, among the most successful in the club's overall 138-year history. But I think it probably does need a bit of change to the way the club runs itself if it wants to go on another incredible journey upwards into League One. Plenty to discuss then with manager Michael Flynn's first season in charge in this summer deep dive. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. If you like what we do here, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. That would help us out a lot. For now, I'm delighted to be joined by Jon Palmer from Gloucestershire Live. Jon, thanks so much for joining us. How do you reflect on Michael Flynn's first season in charge in a 15th place finish in League Two off the back of relegation the year before?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gab. I think Michael Flynn did what he was expected to do in his first season, having walked into a very difficult situation last summer. I remember having a chat with you quite near the start of the season and saying I expected it to be a very middling season, probably win maybe as many as they lose, just to stabilise after what was a very chaotic end to their spell in League One and a huge amount of change last summer. So I think Flynn walked into an extremely challenging situation. He needs this job to work for him after what happened at Walsall and Swindon. He probably needs this one to be a successful one for his own career. I think as first seasons go, considering the turnover of players, 19 in the summer, another 5 in January, I think he's done a solid job, and I think he's done what's been expected of him. I think until middle end of March, Cheltenham were genuinely thought they could sneak into the playoffs. So that I think deserves a little bit of credit, although it ended on a disappointing note at Bromley. Until I'd say, towards the end of March, I still thought the playoff push was possible. Then they lost 4 in a row without scoring, which really ended it. But there were a lot of positives throughout the season, some frustrations, but overall, I think a solid start in his first season at the club.
Yeah, I think his second season's going to be easier from the point of view of he's had a year to get his feet under the desk and establish a core of players he wants to move forward with. But it's going to bring its own challenges, I guess, because there's new ownership coming in. You never quite know what that dictates for a manager and how they want to operate. So I just wanted to ask you, Jon, what's your kind of understanding of how things are progressing in terms of upstairs?
I think what you said in your intro is right. I mean, Cheltenham have had 25 seasons as a Football League club now, and the board, although it's evolved obviously during that period, the board deserve a lot of credit for what they've managed to do without really having any huge sums of cash pumped in from a benefactor. There's been the odd bit of help here and there, but that's mainly been infrastructure-wise rather than playing budget-wise. I think to do what they've done, they deserve a lot of credit, but I do feel like they need help, and I think it needs a change. I think football's evolved. Lower league football, there's very few clubs now that haven't got some serious outside investment, and I think they realise probably they're taking it as far as they can in terms of what they've just done in League One, the three years before last season, to survive there again for a 3-year period. Having done that before, it does push the club to its limits, and it tends to be a struggle going back to League Two after pushing the boundaries of trying to stay in League One. But I think that there is still a little bit, and I say this with a lot of respect for the hard-working people at the club. It's a very small workforce at the club off the pitch. I think there's still a slight non-league feel at the club, even though it's quarter of a century on when the club first got into the Football League. I think it needs to be professionalised off the pitch for it to sort of catch up with what's happened on the pitch, thanks to some great achievements, as you mentioned, over those 25, 26 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we know if there's a preferred bidder at this stage, or is a lot of the sort of talks with regards to a takeover kept under wraps at the moment?
Yeah, it's been very much kept under wraps, but I think some people have now dropped out of the race who were serious contenders. I get the impression now there is somebody moving close to investing some serious cash into the club, and I think it could, which is quite exciting. Although it's not going to solve all the club's problems overnight, I think it could happen in the next few weeks. Certainly this summer, as you said at the start, whether it's in time to make a real impact during this transfer window remains to be seen, because there'll be a certain amount of processes that are outside the club's control with the EFL fit and proper persons test. But I think something is close. I think it's going to be a UK-based investor who's got a lot of experience within high-level football, who could be coming into Cheltenham Town, all being well. I think that's probably about as much as I can say at the moment.
Yeah.
Breaking trust, but I think there is something on the horizon. I think the club know they need it, and I think they feel it's close, within touching distance now of that. Hopefully somebody's come in and help. And I don't think the whole club needs to be sort of ripped up and start again, but I think it does need a bit of help. I think it needs to make strides off the pitch now. If they want to, like you said, if they want to be looking towards League One rather than worrying about the National League, they need a bit of help.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I wanted to talk to you about Gary Johnson's first season back in charge as Director of Football, because I think what's really important here is when we're talking about Gary Johnson, we're talking about a vastly experienced football man, somebody who's assisted Cambridge United's rise up the leagues under John Beck in the late 80s and early 90s, somebody who got Bristol City within a game of Premier League football, somebody who got Yeovil Town into the Championship across 2 spells, and somebody who returned Cheltenham Town to the Football League at the first time of asking. And all four of those achievements were very much against the odds and record breaking in their own ways. And I don't think you achieve that over a 40-odd year managerial career in football if you don't know a bit about football. At the same time, I think there's also that question mark with former managers in that director of football role, in terms of how much are they there to kind of help the manager and be there when called upon, and how much do they sort of have that idea that they maybe know a bit more, and knowing where the boundaries are. I suppose, how do you get the impression that Gary Johnson has kind of managed that aspect of the job in his relationship with Michael Flynn?
Yeah, I think he wasn't Cheltenham's first choice for the role. I think it was a slightly panicked decision last summer to get somebody into the role to try and get some players in, because there was such an exodus when Darrell Clark left, of staff and players. I think you look at the 19 players that came in last summer, you can say you've got to give Gary Johnson some credit for bringing the Torquay players in. So he had Arkell G. Boyd on loan from QPR, and he brought in Ethan Archer, having given him his chance from Three Bridges the previous year. And I think those two have got a lot of work to do, but they obviously have got a huge amount of potential, and there's already been interest in both of them. So I think those two have been two of the impressive pieces of recruitment from Johnson since he took the job. I think the overall use of the loan market in season 1 was underwhelming, I would say. I think with two exceptions, Joel Colwell, outstanding first half of the season, and Sab Stubbs, who was excellent all season and got the club's Supporters Player of the Year award. I think those aside, I think there were some loans that didn't make any impact. I don't think you're ever going to get all of your loans spot on, but I think having loans not even in the matchday squads, or too many loans that you can have in the matchday squad, loans that barely feature, was a bit disappointing. I think the loans under the previous regime, I'm talking the Mickey Moore regime, were particularly influential. And we've discussed this many times before. You could go through the list of loans that Cheltenham had under Moore and say most of them, although there are a few that didn't work out, of course, again, but Sam Smith would be one that stands out. Callum Wright, Josh Griffiths, Matty Pollock, Jacob Greaves, Caleb Taylor, Finn Azaz. There's a long list of excellent loan signings there. I think last season's loans, like the season before, really, Cheltenham need loans to improve the team, rather than just having a load of unproven youngsters from top level clubs on the bench. That's not really any use. You might as well have your Tom Kings and your Superior Vieris on the bench and blood them a little bit when you need to. But I think the loans were slightly disappointing. Then there were a few gambles that I would say probably haven't paid off. That might have been worth the gamble, maybe not particularly expensive gambles. With some of the players they gave a chance to. I think Ibrahim Bakary and Liam Dolson have both got another year to progress. Dolson certainly showed some positive signs, as did Bakary. Bakary's has been made available for transfer this summer. I think the budget is still a little bit skewed, so I think there's a situation where they've probably only really got 11 players signed on at the moment that they want to be part of the squad next season. There's on top of that, there's 4 transfer listed players, and
Yeah.
there's about 6 academy graduates that they probably aren't going to be regular first team players next year, although they might be on the fringes. So you look at those 11 plus any of the transfer listed players who don't go, and I think the budget's almost spent, which is the concerning thing for me. I mean, Tom Bradbury's gone. Ryan Haynes is highly likely to go. I think he's close to joining Brackley Town. So there might be a little bit of money, but there's not going to be a huge amount of money to play with, even though the squad is probably only really 11 players that they see as wanting to be senior regular first team players next season. So that's the challenge. And that's why the loans are going to be so important again next season. But I would say the jury's out on Johnson. I don't know if a manager like Michael Flynn needs somebody like Gary Johnson telling him what to do, and it's traditionally been very much a recruitment role, the director of football role at Cheltenham. Now Pete Johnson obviously is the recruitment specialist who does tend to go out and find some talented players, particularly in the London area. So I would say you have one, you have to have the other. I think it is a significant outlay in terms of salary, and probably higher than it has been in the past for a director of football and a recruitment member of staff. I think that's probably more than Cheltenham have spent before on those 2 roles combined. So they've got to make sure they're getting value for money. But yeah, I think there were a lot of gambles taken last summer to try and put a squad together almost from scratch. Some have paid off, some haven't. And I think the challenge is not to go backwards this season, because Stubbs is, I'm told, they've done everything they can to try and persuade him to sign a contract. I don't think it's going to happen at Cheltenham. I think he's got other interests.
Right.
And there's actually a risk of Cheltenham being weaker this season. Obviously, Flynn would have wanted to have a base that he can build on to try and improve from 15 for 60 points to get up towards those playoff positions, or try and close that 10-point gap. But I think there's a risk that it might be, still very early in the window. Of course, they haven't signed anyone yet, but I don't think they can go out and handpick any players that they want, established EFL players, unless some of the transfer listed players depart, which include Matty Taylor, George Miller, Harrison Sona, and Macquarie, who I mentioned earlier. I think if all 4 of them were to take opportunities elsewhere, I think there'd be a little bit more room for manoeuvre in the transfer window. But I think it's quite tight at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. I think you mentioned the youth prospects there, and from what I can see, John, this is the most talented group of youngsters that Cheltenham Town have had for a long time. So I'm thinking if the budgets are a bit tight, you could take up a few places in the squad with somebody like Mamadou Diallo, possibly Cameron Walters, possibly Freddie Wilcox if he stays on. I think Tustin was the midfielder who signed on. Obieri and King. So that's 5 or 6 players there that have the talent to at least be sort of fringe players in the squad and have those opportunities. And I'm wondering if you think that's the kind of direction the club are going to look in.
Yeah, I think Diallo spent majority of last season as number 2, and I think at the moment I would say it's likely to be Joe Day number 1, continuing his role as goalkeeping coach. I think he'll be number 1 next season unless something dramatic changes. And Diallo could be number 2 again. Whether they then decide it's better to get him out on loan and bring in a lone goalkeeper or a young number 2 that they could put on the bench if needed, or if they were to get injured, of course, they could bring in an emergency loan at any point during the season, rather than having to chuck Diallo in. But Diallo is certainly highly thought of. I think Flynn was very close to putting him on for his debut against Bromley until there was an injury and he had to put on another outfield player. So that was a shame that he didn't get his first team appearance there. But very talented goalkeeper, very good with his feet, and one to watch. But he's got a lot of experience already of being in and around the first team squad. King is obviously a little bit more advanced, having had a brief taste of League One football 2 seasons ago. He scored in the trophy. He's played for England under 18s. Even though he's still very young, he's a lot closer, I would say, to it than the likes of Walters, Tustin that have just stepped up to the under 18s. Wilcox heard some quite good reports about his performances for Oxford City on loan. So but I think he probably will be in a position where he'll go out on loan again. Not 100% on that, but I think he probably will go. They probably benefit from a National League loan. but some of them are likely to be in and around it. Definitely, I think King. They turned down an offer from King in January, so slightly strange situation where he couldn't get on Cheltenham's bench at times, but they didn't want to sell him. So has he actually got a future? Can he bridge that gap between youth football and senior football, or does he need to go into a 21s for a couple of years to develop before he kicks on? That's going to be an interesting one. They've got to try and solve. And Obieri was out on loan at Worcester, so I think some of the players you mentioned have got a lot of potential, a lot of talent. I think loans probably will be the key for the ones that have just graduated. But I can see Diallo at the moment being number two, and working closely with Day in training to try and bring him on, because he's seen. It's very rare that Cheltenham bring a goalkeeper through the academy and go professional. It hasn't happened very often at all. But I'd say King is still there's a lot of good players there, but I think King is the one that there's been a lot of interest in from Championship clubs. At one point, Premier League club, certainly close and monitoring closely when he was around the England under 18s setup. So you're right, it is a talented group. They've had a few really talented groups come through before, but this current lot is up there, and they do need to start making that. I think the academy staff do a really good job. I think it's a good setup, but there needs to be another George Lloyd. There hasn't been quite enough of them recently that have come through and had good EFL careers.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing. You want to have enough senior players so that you're not completely scuppered if there's an injury crisis. But I think you also want to just leave enough of a space for some of these youngsters to come in and surprise you, because that's sometimes how it works out. Players get these opportunities through circumstance and then can end up flourishing. So I would just hope there's enough of a pathway for some of those prospects. So Joe Day, then, John, I think he would be in your conversation for sort of player of the year last season. Did concede a lot of goals, but I suppose that was more in front of him than Day's performances necessarily. So you think with his relationship with Michael Flynn, there's a likelihood that he's going to sign another deal?
Yeah, I think he's highly likely to sign. You're right, Cheltenham conceded 70 in League Two last season. Obviously, Owen Evans started the season as number one. I don't think anyone would say Owen Evans did particularly badly, and he went on to do really well at Barnet. So for him, getting the National League title under his belt. But I think he got injured, and Day came in at a time where the season did turn, which was Swindon at home. That was sort of the low point. Day came in. Performances were very consistent, very good, very calming influence. Vastly experienced goalkeeper. Surprised me. Not because I thought he was bad, but because he hadn't played in the EFL regularly for quite a while, and he's fit as a fiddle. Still a good age really for a goalkeeper, and he's obviously made that slight transition towards coaching. But I think he showed with his performances when he first came into the team that he's still got a lot to offer. And then I would say there was the odd error, but overall he was probably. I think I agree with Stubbs getting player of the year, and I think Thomas was excellent as well. Archer had purple patches. Went off the boil at times, as you probably expect, first season in the Football League. But I think Day was up there with the most consistent performers. And I don't have any worries about him being number one. Very, very capable League Two goalkeeper for next season.
Yeah, absolutely. Arkell Jude Boyd had a really good season, especially going forward, and he can be a joy to watch, as I saw with my own eyes, with a lovely goal against Morecambe in December, which was probably the highlight of his season, really.
Yeah, started off, with good rave reviews really about what he'd done at Torquay. Everyone thought he was ready to step up and give it a go in the Football League, having left QPR where he'd been since he was a very young kid. It was really unfortunate that he got injured scoring his first goal for the club as he actually stroked the ball into the net. He did his hamstring, so mixed feelings for him there, and that obviously cost him a little bit of momentum. But he's explosive, can beat a player, very different to Cheltenham's other main right back option, which is Darragh Power, who I'm not saying he can't attack, but he's more of a defensive fullback than a out and out. I think Jude Boyd is very much a wing back type of hold, and did play on the wing a few times further forward. But I think right back or right wing back is his best position. A lot of pace, good potential to continue to improve, I think. And yeah, he's one that there was interest. There has been interest in. Not sure whether he's going to go this summer or not. Again, Cheltenham find themselves in a slightly strange position where Bloxham has come out and publicly said in an interview with me that he they need to sell a player this summer, and it won't go into the budget. He's been very honest about that. So they get a fee for a player. It's just going to fill a hole that they need to fill, either with a player sale or if they don't sell a player this summer, I think they will actually be worried, and they'll really need an FA Cup run. Obviously, new investment notwithstanding. But so Jude Boyd is one of the definitely players that's attracting attention, and popular with fans. Exciting to watch. The goal against Morecambe was brilliant. He's got to work on his defensive side a bit. I think there was times where he showed that's probably not the strongest part of his game. He's not a terrible defender, but I think he's much prefers running at people and having players run at him. But with the speed that he's got, I think that probably gets him out of trouble at times, and he's got the assets to probably play a little bit higher, I'd say.
So do you think there's a world where Arkle Jude Boyd could be the one who replaces Jordan Thomas, who's could be on his way out? I know there's going to be high league interest in Jordan Thomas. Is it possible that Jude Boyd plays on that right wing and Darragh Power actually plays as that more conservative fullback, if you like?
Yeah, I think that's potential. I think Thomas is still the most likely to go, because Thomas got 1 year left on his contract. I don't think there's any chance of him signing a new contract. He's got a buyout clause in his current contract of 250, which everyone and anyone will know about, if any clubs that are interested. It's just what was put in when they signed him from Bath. Bath City will get a percentage of any fee Cheltenham receive as well, which is fair enough. Did a lot of work in his development, getting him going in senior non-league football. I think Dolson will probably be eyeing the left forward role, depending on what formation Flynn goes with. But he likes to play as a left forward. He can play up front as well. There were times when he played up front well in the two, but I still think Dolson's best position is on the left of the front three. Which then you could end up with Archer either in the middle or on the right, and then there will probably need to be a new attacking side.
Well, John, I think Dolson's season in that case could depend on whether Archer actually stays on or whether he goes somewhere else. Because for me, I think Archer. They played Archer in the 10 role in the second half of the season, and there was a feeling from people I spoke to that he wasn't quite as effective there. So he's definitely at his best cutting inside with those kind of dynamic runs and getting shots away and creating, rather than necessarily playing in the 10 role. So I think Archer would be first choice, obviously, on the left wing. So it means that could be tighter for Dolson to get opportunities. But if Archer goes, then that opens things up for him, doesn't it?
Yeah, Archer played a few times as centre mid, did quite well. Did all right in the 10 at times, but I think I agree. Left side is brought out the best in him. There's Backwell who can play, just in behind the front players. He can play. And Pell certainly has played in a more attacking role at Accrington. I think he was used actually as a centre forward, but I think he can certainly play as a sort of disrupting number 10 with his height and strength. Rather than when he was at Cheltenham before, he was very much a box to box player. So the Pell coming back, be interesting to see what sort of condition he's in. He's had a year of strengthening work with his ACL, and I think he's very close to getting a short run out at the end of the season, but they decided not to risk it. But he's got another year on his contract to try and make an impact in his second spell at Cheltenham. So Backwell and Pell, and then you've got the two deeper line midfielders of Young and Kinsella, which Kinsella signing a new contract was good news, I think. Very underrated player and an important part of the team. And that leaves you with the likes of Dolson, Archer. At the moment, Thomas, Jude Boyd obviously can play on the wing if Power forces his way into the team. And then Miller and Taylor, centre forwards, proven more experienced players, although Miller's not very old. He's got a decent amount of experience, both available for transfer at the moment. So I think that's just down to financial situation of they have to free up some cash somewhere, or they could be going into the new season with a squad of, like you said, relying on a lot of young players.
Yeah, I think the challenge you have up top is Michael Flynn, I imagine, wants a target man. He's had someone like Jamil Matt in his time at Newport, so I think he likes working with a target man. Neither Dolson nor Taylor nor Miller fit that description necessarily, but Miller and Taylor collectively take up, I would imagine, too large a proportion of the club's wage bill for it to be worth it to have both, and neither being the number one centre forward. So I think that's probably part of the reason why somebody like George Miller, who I really liked last season, I think he had a good season, probably one of the reasons why he was the one transfer listed, because I'd be surprised if somebody's going to take on Matty Taylor's wages.
Yeah, I totally agree about Miller. I thought he had a good season to get 11 goals, 9 in the league, or 11 in all competitions. He spent a lot of the season playing up front on his own with the two wingers, and getting a real battering. He's not like you said, he's not necessarily a natural target man, but he's strong. He's awkward. He puts himself about. He chases things down. He's a workhorse, and I think Flynn's a big fan of his. I don't think Flynn certainly would not necessarily want to lose him, but with Taylor is a paradox really, because he's still one of Cheltenham's best players. He just isn't probably going to be able to play 40, 50 games a season. So in terms of efficiency or value for money, they will maybe see that as something that needs to change. But when he does turn it on, and when he came on and scored the win, he scored the winner against Wimbledon away last season. Some of the goals he scored in League One when he first came in, second half of the Darrell Clark season, still maintain that if he'd stayed fit, Cheltenham probably would have stayed up. We'll never know, but he even came back with half a hamstring at the end of the season and scored a couple of goals. So it's just unfortunately, in terms of minutes on the pitch, is unlikely to be enough, as you said, to justify the wages. But still,
Yeah.
really good in flashes. But they can't really carry that. That's why he's been made available, rather than anything against his ability or character or anything like that.
Yeah, Taylor's certainly the best finisher at Cheltenham Town, that's for sure. In terms of central defence, Sam Stubbs is obviously going to be a big one to replace. I guess that's going to be the challenge, isn't it? It's going to be find somebody who can be really aggressive. I spoke to a Swindon fan yesterday who said he really enjoyed Sam Stubbs' matchup against Harry Smith last season, and the sort of the physicality of that, so he can. He can mix it with the best, can he?
Yeah, I think Smith was one of the only players last season that actually give Stubbs a bit of a hard time. There were times that Stubbs made the odd error, so there was the odd lapse. But in terms of somebody actually getting the better of him physically, it didn't happen very often. And Smith would be the one that I'd say caused him. It was great to watch, and that day at Swindon was probably the day that Cheltenham's playoff push probably faded, really, because of the red card for Bradbury and the drop points from being in a really strong position. So, but Smith was up there pretty. From the way that he roughed up Stubbs, would probably have him in consideration for my League Two Team of the Year for that performance. And obviously he did well. He did well across the season as well. But Stubbs is going to be very difficult to replace. I don't think Cheltenham have ever had a Player of the Year from a loan before. I think they've had Young Player of the Year, but never Supporters Player of the Year from a loanee. So he made a really positive impact. They've got Bennett left. They've got Bakary, who's on the transfer list. I think Bradbury going is a big blow. Left-footed centre half, who admitted in an interview with me, he always starts off slightly out of his depth. So he stepped up from Halifax to League One. His first game was a 7-0 defeat when he was 5-0 down at half time, and he'd been megged for the fifth goal. Took him a while to get his Football League debut underway, Elliot, but he's shown himself to be very determined, and in the end, he played quite a few games in League One under Darrell Clark and was actually performing quite well. Last season was his first season in League Two for Cheltenham. I thought he did pretty well. I thought he's a very solid, capable League Two defender. So I think him going is a blow. Also with the fact that he can play left back, and he put some good performances in at left back last season as well. So Bennett's divided opinion, I think it's fair to say, with the fan base. I think he's still, although he's knocking on a bit, and he's not the quickest, he's still a very intelligent player, and he's still very important figure for Flynn, who massively trusts him. And he's a leader. He's calm on the ball. He's not somebody that just would just smash it out of the ground every time he gets it. Sometimes he did get caught Cruyff turning it on the edge of his own box, but I think Bennett is better than possibly he's rated by some Cheltenham fans. But I do understand why he got a bit of criticism for giving a couple of glaring goals away. But he's had a bit of a knee issue. He triggered a new contract just before he went under the knife and had a bit of a clear out, which will hopefully give him a bit of a new lease of life this season, because the knee's been sorted out. So he'll be one of the ones that's working hard on rehab all summer, and he should benefit from that at the start of the season. I think you need some Joe Days, some Scott Bennetts, some Kinsellas. Matty Taylor may well go, but you need a few of them dotted around if you're going to have a lot of young, inexperienced, some players from non-league, some players that are getting their first taste of EFL football. I really think you need some of those established figures. So I think Bennett for Flynn was an important one to get signed on. But you're right, centre half is certainly going to be an area. The centre midfield doesn't look like an issue at the moment, but centre half does. There definitely needs to be some arrivals there that are going to go in and play regularly and improve the 11.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, you've got Bennett, you mentioned, but Bakary is transfer listed. So, I mean, as things stand, I'm not sure quite when the first pre-season game is, but I would imagine it's looking like Cameron Walter's going to get some minutes in pre-season, the way things are going.
Yeah, they've got a game on the 4th of July away to Bishopscleave, and then they play Worcester City at Six Ways on the Saturday. So 2 games in 2 days. I think that will be a mixture of first team players, obviously, because they're back in training from the 26th. Some youth, yeah, the likes of all the academy graduates we mentioned will feature, and then I think there will be also a decent number of trialists involved across those 2 games as well. But what Walter's, Walter's made his first team debut a long time ago now in the trophy and looked really good. And he's filled out a little bit. He's very tall. He's got a good frame. So I'm not saying he's going to go in and play every week in League Two, but he's one that I know they rate highly from the academy. And yeah, those early pre-season friendlies against non-league oppositions, because they're also playing Evesham, they are always interesting to see how some of the scholars and some of the new young pros are getting on and how they're sort of adapting and mixing in with the first team pros. So I think, yeah, you're right. We'll see all of those. I think all of those teenage players that are pros now feature in the early friendlies, and then by the time you get to the 3 home friendlies, it will be more getting towards what Flynn will want for the opening game of the season.
Yeah, best of luck to Cameron Walters with making an impression in pre-season. Left back, then you mentioned Ryan Haynes could be on his way out, but Freddie Wilcox is the only sort of option that I've got there written down, because I think he's a midfielder, but he can also play at left back. So again, is there an opportunity for him? I'm not sure actually. Is he one of those that they're still to agree a deal with, or he's not quite under contract yet, but there's a possibility that they might do something?
Yeah, so of the players offered contracts, Kinsella is signed, Bradbury
Yeah.
is officially gone. I think Haynes is going, and I'm very confident Day and Wilcox will sign their contracts. So, yeah, Wilcox did feature a little bit in League Two early-ish last season. He played left centre back at times, left wing back. I think centre midfield is his best position, but he might get a run. He might get a few games at left back, or I'm sure there'll be trialists at left back, or they might have even signed a permanent left back by then. They will be signing a left back. There's no doubt about that with Haynes going, and obviously they had Val Dedican on loan from Brentford second half of last season as well. So that, and Shipley first half of the season who struggled a little bit. Did all right at times, but he wasn't really left back. I think he's more of a left-sided centre half, Shipley. So yeah, left back's a key area. I think right back isn't, centre midfield isn't. I think it's up front and left back and centre back really that are going to be the key areas. But as I said quite near the start, I think loans will be key. Getting loans in that make a positive impact and aren't making up the numbers is going to be one of the keys to the season, I think, at this stage.
Absolutely. So in central midfield, you've got Luke Young, who actually turned out to become quite an important player for Cheltenham, I think it's fair to say. But I guess the one question mark around him is fitness and whether he can play, start 40+ league games over the course of the season, and the rigours of the demands of that at this stage of his career. So again, do you think you're going to be looking at 1 or 2 more midfielders just for that bit of extra depth and competition to make sure that you're not maybe relying on Luke Young quite so much?
Yeah, there's Sona, who's contracted at the moment but on the transfer list. But I think Kinsella and Young will be in a very strong position to be automatic starters, I would say. And then you've got Pell and Backwell also in there. But I think Young came in having had a great time at Wrexham and captained them through some great times. He had a really nasty toe abscess, and I think there was actually one stage where he was, if he hadn't have nipped it in the bud, he could have actually lost his toe last pre-season. It was a horrible injury. So to come back, because he missed the whole of pre-season, to come back and do what he did for the majority of the season before he succumbed to a knee injury was really impressive. He's a very naturally fit player, and he was certainly missed when he got injured. I think the season tailed off Although there was a little upturn around the Easter period with the win at Notts County and the win against Carlisle at home. Basically, if you look at after Young got injured, it did decline. So I think he became a key player, captain the team regularly when Bennett wasn't playing, and very mobile, very good at keeping things ticking over. Technically good, scored some good long range goals, a couple of good free kicks. You know, his set piece delivery was comfortably the best in the squad. It was bordering on woeful after Young got injured. I would say embarrassing at times that the set piece deliveries became. So he's a really key player. I'd say with him in centre mid with Kinsella, that's not an area for concern at all. I would say.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that if you want to build a reliable League Two side, Liam Kinsella is not a bad starting point, just because he's one of these players that you know what you're going to get from 1 week to the next in terms of that tenacity. I actually think at previous clubs he's been a little bit underrated as a ball player as well. I think he's pretty good at that, but yeah, certainly as somebody who's going to be very tenacious and combative. I think. Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think Young and Kinsella is a good starting point.
Yeah. Kinsella, big fan of Kinsella. If ever a player is giving Cheltenham the run around, because Flynn likes to go man to man all over the pitch out of possession. If you have a player who's causing real issues, for example Dan Crowley for MK Dons, the minute Kinsella is given the job of stopping him, suddenly he quietened down a lot. You know, he's very good at that. He won't let many players get the better of him one-to-one, one-on-one, and unbelievable. You know, if you look at him, he's a very compact character.
Yes.
But he's got a big heart. You know, he's one of those players that will give it absolutely everything, and very popular in the dressing room. Really manager's dream, I would say, in terms of the way that he goes about his business. And give Darrell Clark a lot of credit for bringing him in. But Flynn has worked with him at all of Kinsella's clubs. He's played under Flynn at some point. I think Flynn also knows how valuable. I don't think that the fact that Kinsella and Bradbury were on the transfer list near the start of last season was not because Flynn didn't rate them. I think again it was down to other figures getting involved and probably financial situations. I'm not saying Kinsella's on huge money, but I think it was probably trying to free up some cash somewhere, and maybe looking at the players that were coming in. When Young came in, Pet was already there. Maybe they thought, well, we're going to have to get rid of one of them. We can't afford to have all of them all. But yeah, I don't think it was ever that Flynn didn't rate those two. And obviously I think all parties came out actually with a lot of credit from that situation where Flynn managed the situation well when they didn't go, and I think the players responded well. There was no sulking. There was no, trying to get out of the club or chuck the towel in. They knuckled down and both performed really consistently over the course of the season. So I was quite impressed with that.
Absolutely. We mentioned Tommy Backwell earlier. He's another one who's extremely tenacious. He's had 5 starts, I think, in the 10 role and 5 starts in a deeper midfield area. Where do you see his kind of Cheltenham Town future evolving?
Yeah, in terms of the way that Flynn wants to play when things are going well, which is man for man, they're suffocating teams. He's a great presser. So in the number 10 role, he will tackle like his life depends on it. And he got a nasty head injury last season because he's probably sometimes too brave for his own good. But he's a fearless player, brave player, got the technical ability to expect from somebody that's grown up and come through the Bristol City system. So yeah, when he came in, because I'd seen him play up front during a loan spell a long time ago in the Hellenic League, and I thought he was a striker, but obviously he's sort of developed as a central midfielder. But I think he's still got that. He travels very quickly with the ball. He's sort of glides, not quite Jordan Thomas style, but he can dribble, he can tackle. Scored in his debut, and made a positive impact. Unfortunately, he had the injury, a couple of injuries, and got that nasty bang on the head as well. But he had a hamstring injury where I think he probably got pushed, having not played a huge amount of, not played any league football, but not played a huge amount of competitive football at all. I think he just they needed him, and eventually something popped in his hamstring, which is a real shame. But looked like a good signing. Came in on trial. They had a good look at him before they offered him the deal, and I think he could be, a big part of next season's squad, next season's starting 11.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. Well, hopefully he has a good pre-season and really forces himself into that equation. I want to come back to Ethan Archer, John, because he's been probably one of the most eye-catching players of Cheltenham Town's season. Just gone and produced some lovely sort of highlight reel moments. Do you think the club will look at a six-figure offer that may come their way, and think, yeah, that could be quite persuasive, or do you think the club will actually want to hold on to one of their top players?
Yeah, I think as far as I know, he's the only player that's actually been subject to a bid so far this summer. But it didn't match the bid from MK Dons in January, which was 250. I think the bid from Stevenage a few weeks ago was considerably lower than that, and it was dismissed fairly swiftly. And I think Stevenage have now moved on and brought in other players. So I think he did have a purple patch. He probably started off, and Flynn said this numerous times. Flynn didn't expect him to become one of the main men so quickly, but he did. He did become one of the main players quite early on in the season, and he did feature in every single League Two game, all 46 games in the end, and started the vast majority of them. So there were times where he looked like he could do no wrong. Players couldn't get anywhere near him. He scored the individual brilliant goal against Rotherham in the FA Cup. And some of his goals had a touch of fortune about them, but it just seemed to be that everything he did worked. Then I think he had a dip, probably maybe slightly down to fatigue, slightly down to other teams thinking, actually, we've got to keep an eye on this guy. He's real threat. But overall, he can be proud. Certainly, be very proud of his first season in the Football League. But he did tail off at times, and then he burst back into the limelight with that cracking goal against Notts County on Easter Monday. So certainly a talent. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes this summer. I think Thomas is the one who's most likely to go.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of answer your question about what they would expect to get from, I think they would expect to get more for Archer than the 250 they might end up getting for Thomas, because Archer signed a new contract, so his contract runs for another 2 years. Thomas only 1 year, and Thomas could obviously go on a free at the end of this season if they don't sell him now, and there is the buyout clause. Archer, I think, they're in a much stronger position to bargain, and he might feel he needs 1 more year to develop at Cheltenham, playing every game. But obviously, an offer might come in, but they might be too good to turn down. And he's I think positive off the pitch as well. I think he wants to learn. I think he's got a good attitude. I don't think there's any issues there. I think he's a really good personality and good character. Amazing that he's working as an Amazon delivery driver, and he's been a steward at Wimbledon, and now he's gone to Wimbledon and won in the League Two game. So loads of great stories there with his rise from all the London-based non-league teams that he played for before Torquay. So
well, he certainly delivered for Cheltenham, John.
yeah, and deservedly won a couple of bits of silverware individually at the end of the season as well. So really good. I can see him possibly staying for 1 more year, or if he starts this season as well as he played at times last season, potentially January. But yeah, I still think Thomas is the one who will go first. But I've certainly got interest.
Yeah, and maybe that kind of the money that the club gets for that could help sort of it would help kind of more with off the field from what you're saying at the top, that David Bloxham said would sell Jordan Thomas, but it wouldn't really change the budget. So I suppose with that in mind, John, expectations for the season. On the one hand, as a fan, you always want to feel like your team's making progress and moving in the right direction. On the other hand, Cheltenham Town the fact Cheltenham finished 15th last season doesn't change the fact they are going to have a bottom 8 budget at the start of this transfer window. That may change with ownership, but that might come later in the window. We're not quite entirely sure. So right now it's a bottom 8 budget. How does that kind of inform the expectations placed on Michael Flynn and the management team for 25-26?
Yeah, so as we sit here now on the 16th of June with no new signings announced or confirmed yet, I think it's quite difficult to be confident of an improvement at the moment on 15th place, I would say. But if the transfer business is good, I think, not that I want to see the back of any players, but if some of the transfer listed players are going to have to be moved on to make life easier in the window for Cheltenham, I think if they all stay, say Haynes is expected to go, but if all the other ones sign up, so if Day stays, Wilcox stays, and the transfer players stay, I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of room for manoeuvre in terms of bringing new players in. So it's difficult, but I think it's always a dangerous position to be in, just waiting for a takeover to happen and being in a bit of a sort of no man's land, because
Yeah,
it won't just, somebody takes over the club, it's not going to be transformed overnight and suddenly everything's going to be perfect. And there's plenty of examples of Carlisle being the most obvious one, of teams had money and not spent it particularly wisely. Now they might come storming back up next year and have a double promotion for all we know, but it hasn't worked for them yet with the investment and the amount of signings they made, the amount of managers they got through, and the sort of bit of a mix of different players and philosophies and different Williamson players and Hughes players, and Hughes is staying, which I think is good, because having Hughes in the National League, they should come back up. But look what they've had, a double drop. Forest Green before them, who've
sure.
certainly got resources way beyond Cheltenham's, have dropped twice and then missed out in the playoff semi-finals and penalties. So those are the sort of warning signs that tell me just because somebody's putting a bit of money in doesn't suddenly mean it's going to be a title win this season. You've got to get a lot of other things right as well. But I would be very reluctant to say it's going to be an improvement on 15th at the moment. I don't expect that at the moment, but there's a lot of things that could happen between now and the first Saturday in August that might change my mind about that. But I think there's a few things that concern me about the sort of makeup of the squad, and some of the players and staff. Obviously, a couple of backroom staff have gone as well, which isn't ideal, although it's something that Cheltenham we have having to be used to in recent years. Gav Crow has been there for 10 years, so that is a blow. Some other younger staff have come in, done a couple of years, and got an opportunity at a bigger club. But Gav has been 10 years. He's been a great servant for the club, and he's had an opportunity to go, which is a blow.
Yeah.
So there's a few things that concern me, and I think in the ideal world, as we said earlier, Flynn would have wanted this consolidation season and then kick on. He wants to be challenging for promotion. He hasn't had a promotion out of League Two yet, although he's been agonisingly close a couple of times.
Very, yeah.
So I at the moment I can't look at it and say, Flynn, you should be getting promotion. I think it's going to be, at the moment, it's going to be sort of working hard to stand still, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What's the biggest reason to believe in Cheltenham Town right now?
I think Flynn is a good manager. I think Flynn has got a lot of qualities, and I think the players enjoy playing for him. There were times last season, I like his honesty. Times last season where he held his hand up and he admitted that he got a few things wrong. But I think there were also times when there was a real buzz and there was belief that they could sneak into those playoff places during the last few months of the season. And to do that with the squad that he had to, that was thrown together really in very little time, because last summer was absolute chaos. I think he's got a lot of qualities as a manager. I think he's a good man. He's an honest character. Sometimes gets stick for talking about his old clubs, which I don't understand at all, because he's very popular at Newport, and I don't think he's got any bitterness about Wams at his other two clubs. But Newport, obviously, he's one of the all-time club legends really there as a player and what he did as a manager. So I've got no issue with that at all. He's when you go back to your old clubs and you get a good welcome, it's a good sign, I think.
Yeah, I'd like that. It often seems to me, John, that when managers go back to an old club where they're really popular, but there's an opposition manager, it can feel awkward for them because they don't want to feel like they've got carried away and forgot who they're currently managing. But I actually think it's quite nice, when you can take a moment to sort of think about old memories and say hello to people. And yeah, I think that's quite, I don't see anything wrong with that. And also, Michael Flynn was very successful at Newport County, and I think for Cheltenham Town to have a manager who's been very successful at this level against the odds, I don't think that should be looked at as a bad thing. So yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you on that one.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why Cheltenham gave him the job, because they probably saw some similarities between what he took on. He took on a hopeless situation at Newport with relegation looking inevitable, kept them up, and then turned them into a promotion-chasing team with some unbelievable FA Cup and League Cup runs along the way. So, and made the club a lot of money. I think that's exactly what appealed to him about him to Cheltenham, and why they thought he was the right man to take over when Clark left. So yeah, I think it was a good appointment. So he I think is a good League Two manager. So that gives me cause for optimism. I think some of the assets the club have got on the pitch are still going to be there next season, whether one or two depart. I think there's still some exciting talent. And I think obviously the takeover, as I warned earlier, I don't think it's going to solve everything overnight. But I think it does give cause for optimism. But I think the board do need help, and the board have held their hand up and said that the things we want to do at the club now, to keep taking it forward, which would involve a new main stand, a major overhaul of the training ground, which they now own, and I'm sure improve the playing budget to make it more competitive. Those things aren't going to happen unless there's some new investment. So they've asked for it, and obviously they've always had that safety net in the past of Simon Keswick and Charles Jennings, who's still one of the main shareholders and who's involved with the negotiations with the potential new investors. But I think Keswick's departure, having done a huge amount for the club over the last 20 years or so, means they haven't got that safety net anymore. So they know that unless something changes, they probably are going to be battling to stay in the Football League. So they will hope, and I know David Bloxham's said several times in interviews his aim as chairman is to try and establish the club in League One. That seems a long way at the moment, but that's what they're working towards with the forthcoming changes that will happen one way or another.
Biggest reason for doubt?
Biggest reason for doubt is probably the fact that the squad is looking a bit flimsy at the moment.
Sure.
Looking a bit threadbare. It's always a bit of a risky position to be in when you've got 4 players who are on the transfer list but are under no pressure to leave, that have got another year left on their contracts and could quite happily sit there and battle for their place, but they're not necessarily going to get offered something better elsewhere. It's quite a difficult position to be in, but I think they had to try something to try and free up some cash. So looking through the squad, I think it's, you've got 4 on the list, you've got 5 or 6 young lads that are trying to build experience but are probably not ready yet for every week in League Two. So like I said earlier, there's probably only really 10 or 11 that are core players, I would say, to be senior experienced players to play regular in League Two. So huge amount again needs to be done, and I'm not 100% convinced on the loan signings so far under the current regime, with the obvious exceptions of Colwell and Stubbs. Ethan Williams looks a really good player. I'm not criticising, but having Ashley Hay, Val Dedican, Ethan Williams all in the team, along with Ethan Archer, Arkell Dew Boyd, Liam Dawson, there's too many there that haven't been there and done it. So I think you need to have a solid core, and then you can bring in the odd young, exceptional young talent, hopefully from a bigger club that can come in and make an impact. I think at times last season there weren't enough experienced heads on the pitch, and obviously that wasn't helped by injuries to the likes of Harry Pell right at the start of the season, Luke Young, Scott Bennett. So there are some concerns. Bradbury going is a concern. Gavin Crowe going is a concern. Ryan Haynes turning down an offer at Cheltenham to sign for a newly promoted National League club is a slight concern, because I think he was showing what a good player he could have been after his long-term injury. Towards the end of the season, he looked good. So yeah, there's a lot that could potentially be worrying, but I think the big story which you mentioned right at the start of this chat is the off-the-field situation, which has reached. It's a vital time in the club's history this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your, too early for a prediction, because we're a long way away from the season starting, but just do you have an overall kind of feel on the direction that things are going in?
Yeah, I think I don't want the new owners to come in and end up having to build from non-league. That's not an easy thing to do, and I think although this isn't particularly going to excite I think season ticket sales have been good, which is positive. The fans have stuck with it. And I think
do we know how many they've sold yet?
I think they've sold. They're getting towards the League Two record again, sort of 17 towards 1800, I think, which has been really good. So the fans have stuck with it, and I think they would have enjoyed a lot about last season. And then there would have been a lot about last season that was probably slightly frustrating. But overall, I think there were a lot of games that could have gone either way. There was a lot of late goals, a lot of late drama. And I think after 3 years of just trying to cling on, really, in League One, I think it was, in a way, refreshing. And I think League One takes its toll on Cheltenham. Cheltenham trying to fight to be in League One is not easy, and it sometimes does a lot of damage over a period of time. But I think so fans are stuck with it, and I don't think the fans will necessarily want to hear it. I think it might just need another season of I would probably compare it to when John Ward took over. Now there wasn't a huge amount going on off the pitch in terms of new investment then, but he came in and oversaw two 14th place finishes, followed by promotion via the playoffs in 2006 with the John Finnegan, Grant McCann, and Steve Guinan winner in the final. That's what he did over a relatively short period of time. But there were those two mid-table finishes between 04 and 05. Sorry, 04, 05 and 05, 06. He only signed Craig Armstrong in that summer as a permanent signing.
Just gradually building.
Yeah. So if Flynn can get to the end of this season with something that's ready to then kick on with one or two additions, rather than starting this, being in mid-June with only really 10 players, that would give him a lot more chance. So I think I don't think Flynn's job will be depending on a promotion challenge this season.
I agree,
he might need to. I mean, he's only got 1 year left on his contract anyway, but he might need to do a John Ward-esque another sort of season of similar or hopefully slightly better, and then there might be a platform then with new ownership, with slightly more stability next summer, to maybe then have a go at it. So I'm at this very early stage. I'm not going to start talking about league positions, but I'd say I wouldn't mind another 60-pointer or so, win roughly as many as you lose, maybe be quite strong at home, pick up what you can away, and try and never be in trouble. And if you're not in trouble in League Two, with there being 3 automatics and 4 in the playoffs, you've always got a chance of maybe having a late push. But I'm not expecting a promotion push this season. That's to be totally honest. I'm not expecting a promotion push, so I think there's a lot of stuff still to sort out off the pitch.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, listen, John, it's been great to get your insight from Gloucestershire Live. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate Cheltenham Town Summer Deep Dive. If you like what we do here at EFL Debate, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube, and you can also download the Gloucestershire Live app as well to keep up to date with all things Cheltenham Town. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you again for another Summer Deep Dive very soon.